What if I told you the most important defense supply deal of the last decade didn't make the front page of any major newspaper? No missiles, no warships, no dramatic summit. Just a cargo shipment leaving a facility in Malaysia, bound for Japan carrying minerals most people have never heard of. But those minerals are inside every electric vehicle motor, every wind turbine generator, and every high-performance guidance system used in modern defense hardware. And as of October 2025, Japan became the first country on Earth to receive a commercial supply of these materials from outside China's control. The supplier? Australia, not the United States, not Canada, not Europe. Australia. And the reason why, when you understand it, fully reveals a 15-year strategic bet, a supply chain revolution, and a minerals deal locked in just days ago that runs until 2038. Let's count down the 5 developments that explain why Japan just chose Australia as its most critical defense supply partner and what it means for the rest of the world. You've heard of oil wars. You've heard of semiconductor wars. But the next great resource battle isn't about crude oil or silicon chips. It's about 17 elements called rare earth metals. And at the top of that list, the ones that matter most for defense and advanced technology are 2 elements you've almost certainly never heard of: dysprosium and terbium. These aren't exotic science experiments. They're inside the motors that drive electric vehicles. They're in the generators that power wind farms. And they're in the magnets used in drones, missile guidance systems, and advanced fighter aircraft. What makes them unique is their ability to enhance the heat resistance and magnetic performance of so-called permanent magnets, the kind that keep working under extreme temperature and pressure. Without them, modern high-performance motors simply can't function. According to the Quad Critical Minerals Initiative launch in July 2025, a joint framework between Australia, India, Japan, and the United States, global demand for critical minerals is expected to quadruple by 2040. That's not a small trend. That's a structural transformation of the global economy, and every country that wants to build EVs, clean energy infrastructure, or next-generation defense systems is scrambling to secure these materials. Here's the problem. China controls around 70% of rare earth processing globally. And when it comes to the heavy rare earths, specifically dysprosium and terbium, Chinese control of approximately 98 to 100% of global heavy rare earth separation capacity has made every other country completely dependent on Beijing's goodwill. For Kenji Watanabe, a procurement manager at a Japanese auto parts manufacturer, that means watching China's export signals every single morning. Because if Beijing restricts shipments, his production line doesn't slow down. It stops. Japan has lived with that vulnerability for decades, and it was the first country to decide it had to change. To understand why Japan turned to Australia, you have to go back to 2010. During a diplomatic dispute with Japan over a Chinese fishing trawler near disputed islands, Beijing made a decision that shocked the global tech industry. It restricted rare earth exports to Japan. Prices surged almost immediately. Some minerals spiked by as much as 500% in months. Japanese factories are dependent on these materials to build motors, electronics, and industrial equipment found their supply chains suddenly broken. Companies panicked. Executives held emergency meetings, and an entire nation realized that its most advanced industries were running on a single thread, and China held scissors. That moment was a turning point, but the lesson faded for most of the world. For Japan, it never did. Then came a second wake-up call. In December 2023, China banned the export of rare earth extraction and separation technology, a move that targeted anyone trying to build processing capacity outside its borders. You could mine the ore. You couldn't refine it without Chinese equipment and expertise. Even Western-backed projects, such as Brazil's Serra Verde heavy rare earths mine, still depend on China to refine their product. Raw supply diversification is meaningless without processing capacity. Then in April 2025, China restricted exports of gallium, germanium, antimony, and graphite. In October 2025, the United States and China announced an agreement to a year-long pause on Chinese rare earth export controls in exchange for various U.S. trade and tariff concessions. But here's the critical point. China's weaponization of rare earths is not a temporary tactic. It's a recurrent feature of its modern economic statecraft. Since April 2025, Beijing tightened, eased, and reimposed export controls at will, using rare earths as a lever of pressure in its trade confrontation with the United States. Foreign buyers must still secure a license from Beijing to access these critical materials. The pause is not a solution. It's a reminder of the problem. And Japan understood years before this moment that the only real solution was to build a supply chain that didn't touch China at all. Here's what most coverage of the rare earth story misses. While Western governments were writing policy papers and commissioning studies, Japan was doing something much more concrete. It was funding Australian mining. Back in 2011, two Japanese entities, Sojitz Corporation, a major trading house, and JOGMEC, the Japanese government's metals and energy security agency, formed a joint venture called Japan-Australia Rare Earths, or JARE. Their mission: fund and secure supply from Lynas Rare Earths, an Australian company mining at Mount Weld in Western Australia. Sojitz became the sole distributor of Lynas rare earth products in Japan, and JARE has since made multiple rounds of equity and loan investment into Lynas, including in $200 million Australian dollars injection to fund production expansion. Mount Weld is one of the highest-grade rare earth deposits on Earth. Lynas mines the ore there, ships it to its processing facility in Kuantan, Malaysia, and refines it into usable rare earth products. For light rare earths, the neodymium and praseodymium used in standard permanent magnets, this supply chain was already working for years. But the real prize was always the heavy rare earths: dysprosium, terbium. In 2023, Sojitz secured a supply agreement with Lynas for dysprosium and terbium, which triggered Lynas to accelerate heavy rare earth production capacity. And JARE didn't just sign a contract. It backed that contract with real capital, providing equity and loans through Japan-Australia Rare Earths to ensure Japanese interests remained aligned with production capacity development. That's not a procurement deal. That's a 15-year strategic alliance between two countries built quietly, funded consistently, and structured to deliver results when it mattered most. October 30th, 2025. Sojitz Corporation confirmed it had begun the import of heavy rare earths, specifically dysprosium and terbium produced by Lynas Rare Earths, into Japan. The ore came from Mount Weld, Australia. Separation happened in Malaysia, and the first commercial delivery landed in Japan. This marks the only commercial heavy rare earth supply chain outside the People's Republic of China, the sole producer for nearly 3 decades. That sentence deserves a moment to land. For 30 years, if you needed commercial quantities of dysprosium or terbium, you went to China. Full stop. There was no alternative. Now there is one, and Japan has first rights to it. Sojitz CEO Kosaku Omura told reporters, "We'll continue promoting diversification of the rare earth supply chain and contribute to a stable supply of critical materials." Sojitz holds more than 70% market share of neodymium sales in Japan. This is not a single company's commercial win. This is the backbone of Japan's entire rare earth economy, secured through a 2-decade investment in an Australian mining company. And where does the United States stand? America's heavy rare earth resources are substantial, but the infrastructure, chemistry, and throughput needed to turn them into usable dysprosium and terbium are still in early development. MP Materials' capabilities are still years away from commercial viability. Japan didn't wait. It built. And now the US and Europe, both trying to establish their own magnet metal independence, are competing with an entrenched Japanese anchor tenant for the only proven non-Chinese source available. If the October 2025 shipment was the breakthrough, what happened in March 2026 was the lock-in. Lynas Rare Earths and Japan-Australia Rare Earths have entered into a revised supply agreement extending the partnership through 2038, establishing a $110 per kilogram price floor for neodymium praseodymium, a pair of rare earth elements essential for the high-strength permanent magnets used in electric vehicles, wind turbines, robotics, and advanced defense technologies. Let's break down what JARE committed to. JARE commits to buying 5,000 tons of NdPr annually. Heavy rare earths will play a larger role, with 75% of Lynas' production available to Japanese customers, and JARE committing to at least 50% of total heavy rare earth oxide output. That's neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, and terbium locked in at guaranteed minimum prices until 2038. The $110 per kilogram floor mirrors the minimum the U.S. Department of Defense agreed to pay for NdPr purchase from MP Materials Mountain Pass Mine in the United States, helping to establish a consensus NdPr price floor for Western supply chains. In other words, Australia and Japan just set the Western price benchmark for the materials that power EV motors and defense hardware. Together, this deal didn't emerge from nowhere. It sits inside a dense web of allied frameworks that formed at remarkable speed in late 2025. On October 20th, 2025, President Trump and Prime Minister Albanese signed the United States-Australia Framework for securing the supply of critical minerals and rare earths at the White House. On October 27th, 2025, President Trump and Prime Minister Takaichi of Japan signed the United States-Japan Framework for securing the supply of critical minerals and rare earths. Following the signing of the U.S.-Australia framework, the U.S. Department of Defense announced its support for the development of Alcoa's gallium refinery in Western Australia, turning the bilateral joint venture between Australia and Japan into a trilateral effort. The project is expected to produce 100 tons of gallium per year. In July 2025, the Quad Australia, India, Japan, and the United States launched the Quad Critical Minerals Initiative to ensure the availability of critical minerals within the partnership and reduce dependence on China. And underneath all of this, it's a number that tells you everything about why Japan trusts Australia above anyone else. Japanese foreign direct investment into Australia reached a record $141.1 billion in 2024, making Japan the only foreign investor to have increased its investment in Australia every single year for more than a decade. That's not a transactional relationship. That's a structural alliance. And in October 2025, as Australia's senior Quad official put it, Japan received its first shipment of heavy rare earths from Lynas, the first heavy rare earth supply chain outside China. Gallium, fluorite, and zirconium are next. There's a final piece to this story that most analysis overlooks. Japan's success is also a warning. For the United States and Europe, both scrambling to establish magnet metal independence, this is a reminder there is still only one free world heavy rare earth supply chain, and Japan just secured first rights. The October 2025 Australia-US critical minerals deal was met with fanfare, with both signatories promising to invest 1.5 billion Australian dollars in critical mineral projects across Australia. But since 2019, the Australian government has promised over 6 billion Australian dollars in loans to Darris critical mineral extraction. Most of this has gone to upstream mining firms, rather than addressing the key bottleneck of processing and refining technology. Mining the rock is not enough. Refining it is where the geopolitical power lies. Japan understood this in 2011. It funded it. It waited. It built. And in 2025, it started receiving the payoff while the rest of the Western world is still trying to catch up. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Japan made a 15-year bet on Australia, and it paid off. The US is now following that same playbook. Years later, Europe is still searching for its version. And China? China is watching all of this and has already demonstrated it will use its remaining dominance as a weapon whenever it wants. So tell me this. As the race for critical minerals accelerates into the 2030s and as Australia quietly becomes a geological anchor of the Western world supply chain, is Australia just a lucky country with the right rocks? Or has it been making smarter moves than anyone gives it credit for? And if you're thinking about where to build a life, a career, or a business in the next decade, does the answer to that question change anything for you? Let me know what you think in the comments.